Alrighty, well, welcome everybody to the 2025 Fall Burn Training Workshop. Without any further ado, I think all of you are pretty familiar with this, so we'll just jump right into our agenda. So we'll first start out with any questions you may have from the review material, the basics and background video, as well as the ARB meteorology basics video. After that, we'll talk about some recent smoke management program history. That will segue nicely into talking about last year specifically and how that went. Then we'll talk about the general weather outlook for the upcoming burn season. After that, we'll go over some final preseason updates, including our start times and test dates and all that good stuff. And lastly, here as part of the PowerPoint presentation, we'll go over some workshop examples from last season to see the program in action. At the very end of our meeting here, we'll do a website dashboard tour and program file submission demo. So moving right along, are there any questions from the review videos? Not hearing any, so we'll just go right along then. So let's talk about some recent history of the smoke management program. So first we'll take a look at this through the lens of precipitation and drought. So we'll start by, let me let someone in real quick. All right, we'll start by looking at our drought maps here. Over there on the right is our 2025 map. We can see that drought conditions have gotten much worse for most of the state. However, for the Sacramento Valley Air Basin, just about everywhere is out of any drought category, and only some spots are there in the abnormally dry category. This is because we had a rather productive winter last year through early this year. Of course, we saw a little bit of this through the burn season as well, where November was quite rainy overall, and we had that atmospheric river storm at the very end there that allowed us to end the program itself by a few days just in time for Thanksgiving. Through the whole burn season, we had 19 wet days, which is the most since 2017, and we'll see some more details on that. We also had a lot of rain in 2021 as well. And if we're looking at our averages for how things went through the winter, just about everywhere was around 80 to 100% of normal, especially around our area, and a few spots were above 100%, so a little bit above normal there as far as rainfall and precipitation. So looking at things through the lens of wildfire, we missed a little bit of it last year, since the most notable wildfire event we had was the Park Fire, which was mostly, if not, yeah, it was, I believe, 99% containment at the time the fall burn season started. However, it's still very much worth mentioning that to say that historic wildfire activity has been a part of the smoke management program history as of late is an understatement. We can see here from this graphic from CAL FIRE that 9 of the 20 largest California wildfires have occurred since the year 2020, which is just insane to think about, almost half of this list here. And then all but one of the largest 20 have occurred since 2003. So history in the making. Through these past few years. And of course, the Park Fire there at number 4 just from last year, even if we didn't have any direct impacts to the fall burn program. So next we can look at some more details, but first we can talk about the overall vibe of what we've been seeing. And that is that we have been experiencing more challenging meteorological conditions for the smoke management program. We have seen a large increase in the number of no burn days due to high fire danger and gusty north wind setups. We've also had to deal with historically strong and anomalous rains flooding fields for weeks on end, making burning impossible, and also prolonged periods of stagnation beneath abnormally strong high pressure systems. And those, of course, lead to very poor dispersion and just allows smoke to settle in the valley without ever really getting moved out of the area. And of course, going along with that historic rain that we've seen as far as last year as well as in 2021, drought conditions have improved overall, especially from before 2021 when there was severe drought throughout much of the state and especially in the Sacramento Valley Air Basin. So now we can take a look at some quantitative aspects of those ideas. So if we're looking at the rows on this chart here, we have the entire modern program from 2002 up through last year as top row. Below that, we have the first 10 years or so of the program, then the latest 10 years of the program under that, and then at the very bottom row, that is the latest 5 years. So if we first want to look at our no burn days over there on the right, third from the right column, we can see in those first 10 years of the program, only 6% of our days were no burn days versus in the latest 10 years and the latest 5 years, it's a lot closer to 14%. So calling a lot more no burn days, largely because of gusty north winds, but it could also be because of terrible air quality from wildfire impacts. We can also see for our rainfall, the overall program average is right around 3 inches. And then these last 5 years, we've actually been above average for our rainfall. So even though we've had not the greatest amount of rainfall in all of these years, we've had a very above average rainfall through 2021 and 2024. And that has pushed our average up quite a bit. You can see the average was quite a bit lower in the latest 10 years. If we cut out 2021 and 2024 as well, that number would be much, much, much lower. And some other things we can note here as far as how much we're able to burn. We can see in those first 10 years of the program, that second column there, if we're looking at rice acreage especially, so third from the left column, that's about 30,000 acres on average per season compared to just 14,000 in the past few years. We can also see that we have our acres per complaint metric there close to the middle of this chart, and that's just a metric that takes how many acres we're able to burn before some sort of air quality complaint comes in. Those first 10 years was just over 3,200, and in the latest 5 years, it's over 3,500 now. In those latest 10 years, it really dipped there to below 3,000. So in the latest history of the program, we are overall more efficient and can burn more with getting less complaints, which is a great thing. So there's a lot of data there. If you'd like to look at this data yourself, I'd be happy to send it to you. So just let me know. Next, we can talk about last year specifically. So as far as wildfire goes, it was a rather there was a lot of wildfire last year, mainly from the Park Fire, which, if you may recall, was about 400,000 acres, but there was just over 1 million acres of wildfire burning last year, and this is quite a bit more than around 300,000 acres that we saw in 2023 and 2022. The 1 million acres is still much better than the 2.6 million and 4.3 million we saw in 2021 and 2020, respectively. And as we were also talking about earlier, overall wildfire had a fairly small impact on the burn operations since the Park Fire, which was the closest one and the largest wildfire last year, was all but contained when our burn season started. Also worth highlighting, we had very high burn productivity. We had the highest rice acreage since 2015, so that was great. We also had the third highest prescribed fire acreage since 2010, with 2023 and 2022 being the only higher ones. So these past few years have been very productive as far as prescribed fire, which is also great. in addition to how productive we were, we only had 7 complaints through the season, which resulted in us being very efficient. And this, of course, was a significant improvement from 2023, in which we had 26 complaints. So a lot of changes were made, and things were much better last year. Then, of course, the most notable weather event we had was heavy rain through November. The month started out with some pretty good rain events, but nothing truly massive yet. But we still ended up accruing 19 wet days, mostly through November, and that's the highest since 2017. We did end up getting 6.55 inches of rainfall, which is over twice the average we get during the burn season. And most of this rain arrived as an atmospheric river storm in late November, and that shut our program down a bit early, since there was no way we were going to dry out anytime soon to get more burning done. Next, we can talk about our upcoming weather pattern. So to set the stage, if we're talking about El Nino and La Nina, these are our oceanic temperature patterns that have an influence on what sort of weather patterns are more and less likely over California. But right now we are in a La Nina watch. So this is a very, very similar setup to last year. Right now we're on the cusp of Enso neutral and La Nina, or right now we're pretty much Enso neutral, and we're going to become a bit more La Nina-y, if that's an adjective, through the season. That's the forecast. And of course, La Nina effects through winter are typically higher chances for early season rain, below average rainfall overall, and higher chances for inside slider systems, which of course are the gusty north wind setups where our low is off to the east through the Great Basin. So if we're starting in Enso neutral, neither El Nino or La Nina, just right there in the middle, and we're transitioning more towards La Nina, these traditional La Nina effects might only become more pronounced towards the end of the season. So we can take a look at how this might correlate to our seasonal outlooks from NOAA here. We can see that we're expecting above average temperatures for California and our area specifically through the next few months here. This is a forecast for September through November. We'll see a little bit of a cool down here in the present, although we are expecting things to heat back up again right around when the program is getting going. So this does seem to be lining up well. We're seeing high pressure systems tending to be a bit stronger than historical averages, so expecting more of that. And if we look at our precipitation outlook, we can see we're right there in the middle for equal chances of below or above average precipitation. So our first big rain event for the region typically doesn't arrive until around Halloween. So perhaps this is just saying that you can expect overall seasonal tendencies. We might have a few random early season events, as we've sort of had with these thunderstorms. So we'll take a look at, well, we'll have to watch how those setups evolve. And otherwise, we can expect our first major rain event to most likely arrive there in late October, early November. So overall, we can expect a similar setup to last year. With last year, of course, we had a little bit of everything and some good rain in November. So we'll keep last year in mind especially, and just deal with whatever comes our way the best we can. So for our relevant information for the burn season, the program will officially commence on Monday the 15th and will be going through November 30th. We can see that we have 525,000 planted acres. This is right about average. The 20-year average is about 527,000. Our burn limit is set at 125,000 acres. As per usual, our rice burn hours are from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. with all flames out by 4 p.m. Orchard crop burn hours are 8:30 a.m. up to 5 p.m. or an hour before sunset, whichever occurs first. Most importantly, here in the near term, our program test days are going to be next week, Thursday and Friday. That's the 11th and the 12th. So on those days, Western Weather will be sending out the forecasts as if the season were ongoing. We'll be making sure everyone is getting them okay and all the data is there as planned. And we'll also be expecting the air districts to send in their test files, acreage files, to make sure that we're receiving everything okay and that everyone's accounts are working as intended. Okay, before we move on to the case studies, are there any questions about the recent history, the weather outlook, anything like that? Okay, hearing none, we'll just go right ahead into our case studies. So, just like last year, we're going to be running through 3 examples of burn days from the previous burn season to see the process in action. We all have some good days and bad days to look at, and we'll see that they're relatively easy to manage if the meteorology is very clearly good or bad. It's the marginal days that are the most difficult to figure out what to do, and unfortunately, they are very common. So let's jump into our first example here. So all these screenshots are from the 9 a.m. forecast file, which of course has most of the forecast information on it, as well as the basin distribution of acres. So this is on the first page here for this day. You can take a look at our atmospheric conditions there on the top. We can see that our air quality has decreased. We have more PM2.5 in the air. We can see our stability has increased as well. Our inversion has also increased, and our wind speed has increased as well. So the first 3 would tell us that things have gotten worse, but the wind speed does look promising. We can move on to the coordinator comments next, and it's calling for extended burn hours. So it looks like we have some chances for showers to develop just from this note here. So we're assuming that we're going to have some instability since there must be some rain coming in. We can look down at today's distribution as well, excuse me, and we can see that we are well above the standard 200 per county, 2,000 overall. We're at 3,000 for the whole valley, and everyone has, or just about everybody has some extra acres to work with. So let's take a look at the meteorology and the forecast more specifically. We can see first off that we have a storm moving in here. In our surface wind pattern, we have sustained winds out of the south-southeast, 4 to 10 miles per hour, gusts around 15 to 20. Those are typically agreeable for burning. And we have some pretty good transport winds to work with as well. South to southwest winds sustained 10 to 17 miles per hour, gusts around 25 to 30. So those winds sound nice. You can see our stability is yet a bit worse than the previous day. Those are some slightly stronger inversions between these 2 stations, but it's expected to get reasonably unstable later in the atmosphere as well. Mixing heights look okay too. There in the burn day status outlook, we can see that the next day may result in a wet day, so we are expecting some rain overnight. So this is one of those classic setups. We're trying to just burn as much as we can before the rain comes in, since we're expecting the atmosphere to destabilize as the storm is coming in. We can look here at a picture of some good dispersion. We see some nice lift there from this burn that's ongoing. Lots of smoke, but it's rising pretty quickly, and it's also staying elevated as it leaves the area and disperses. So this is what we like to see. As a result from this burn day, we can see that we had almost 1,900 acres burned across only really 4 counties. So it's a very productive burn day with 0 complaints, and the air quality actually improved the next day. So we did a really good job on this day, taking advantage of the increasing instability ahead of that incoming storm. Next, we have a bit of a different example. We can take a look at our atmospheric conditions first yet again. We can see our air quality's got a bit worse, but our 500 millibar height has decreased, so it's a bit less stable. Our inversion has decreased, so it's a bit less stable. And our wind speed has greatly increased. But if we go to the coordinator comments, we can see in all caps, no burn day, gusty north winds, and red flag warning. So we can surmise from this, we have our 22-mile-per-hour sustained winds are going to be out of the north, which is no good for us, since that will be burning all our smoke towards Sacramento and the Bay Area. And we have no acres to burn for the day. Take a look at the forecast more specifically. You can see that gusty north-north winds sustained up to 20 miles per hour, gusts around 30 to 35, gusts as high as 40 possible potentially in the windiest areas. And then transport winds 20 to 30 miles per hour out of the north, gusting up to 50. So these winds are far too strong to burn in, and you will very likely get fumigation if you attempt to burn. And fumigation looks like this. We can see the smoke is staying very close to the ground and it's hauling it away from the fire. So when you have a setup like this, you are very, very likely going to have smoke impacts since the smoke is not rising anywhere and it's moving quickly. So folks are going to see this and are very likely to complain. I myself would like to complain if something like that was happening to me. So as a result of that decision, nothing was burned and there were zero complaints, of course, and the air quality improved through the next few days as yet another no burn day was called. And so everything is set up as best as it can be for when the north winds stop. We have the best possible air quality so we can get right back to burning. Lastly, we can look at our marginal example. So there's a lot going on in this one. It'll take longer to go through, but this is the kind of thing we'll have to do on plenty of the days coming right up. So if we're looking at our conditions first, we can see our air quality improved a little bit. It's okay. We have our 500 millibar height, which has decreased, but it's still kind of up there as far as being rather strong. And our 6 a.m. inversion is quite strong at 17, but it did get a little bit better from the previous day. You can see our average wind speed through the valley has increased a bit and is up to 8 miles an hour, so that's not too bad. We can see that it just says permissive, relatively strong morning inversions, and a chance for eddying flow in some western areas. So doesn't look perfect, but there's nothing here that would result in any restrictions or reductions in acreage as the program is laid out. Next, we can take a look at the forecast itself. We can see there's quite a bit of writing in the wind pattern area, which is a bit of a red flag in and of itself. If the forecaster is spending this much time trying to figure out what the winds are going to do, it's a good sign that it'd be a good idea to join the conference call if you're planning on burning anything. Well, if you're planning on burning anything at all, it's always a good idea to join the conference call. But especially when you see this much writing, be like, okay, this looks complicated. I better ask about what's going to happen in my area specifically. But we can basically summarize all this as south-southeast winds that are okay through most of the valley, especially on the east side, and they're a bit lighter and more chaotic on the west side of the valley, and there's a chance for some eddying flow. Transport winds are pretty good, expecting southerly winds 10 to 15 miles per hour with gusts around 25. However, we note that the transport winds look like they're going to decrease through the day, which is not ideal. We typically want transport winds to be nice and strong at the end of the day to help blow away anything that has risen to the mixing height. If we go down there, we can see the inversion did improve between the Sutter Buttes and Pennington quite a bit from the previous day. It's really not that bad. And the forecast instability is pretty good. We note the mixing heights look good for the south, but they look a little low there for the northern part, the northern half of the valley via the basin stability discussion. And the cautionary notes just warn of potential eddying flow on the west side of the valley and some lower mixing heights for northern areas. So let's take a look at what happened for the winds that day. If we're looking at our bottom two graphs here, this is for Plainfield and Yuba City South, so sort of capturing what the south end of the valley was doing. You can see it cooperated quite well out of the south-southeast, pretty much at the forecast wind speeds. And if you're unfamiliar with reading wind roses, the bars extending from the center show where the wind is coming from, and the colors indicate the speeds at which the wind was blowing. So the blue is up to 5 miles per hour, red is 5 to 10 miles per hour. So if we're looking at Plainfield and Yuba City South, we can see winds are coming out of the south to southeast at those wind speeds, generally around 0 to 5, and then a bit out of 5 to 10 miles per hour. The northern half of the valley, however, was a bit weirder. There, if we're looking at the Orland Buttes as well as Chico State Farm, we can see, at least over in Orland, there was a bit of northwesterly flow as well as some weak easterly flow, most likely from an eddy. And there was also quite a bit of southerly flow. So the winds were really fighting. They were really squirrely in the northwestern part of the valley. We can see if we're going over to Chico State Farm, you can see there was quite a bit of south wind that was forecast, but there was also a lot of northeasterly wind as well, which is going to be our flow coming off of the mountains. If we're looking at our transport winds for the day, we can see they played out pretty much as forecast. It was pretty good out of the south to southwest and just about right at the speeds that were expected, mainly around that 10 to 20 mark, and then also quite a bit between 5 to 10 miles per hour. But as far as the results of that day, we saw we had some good acreage burned by just about everybody, but we did get 4 complaints received in Butte County, and this was due to some smoke from a prescribed fire that was, I can't remember precisely where it was, but it was up in the foothills rather than in the valley. But from what we were able to tell, upslope flow was not enhanced by the upper level winds and generally remained light. And so when downslope flow returned at night and in the evening, prescribed fire smoke crept back into the valley and resulted in those complaints. So we think this happened because the mixing heights were quite low there and the transport winds were fading away in the evening. So the upslope flow was very, very weak. The smoke just kind of hung out there in the foothills. And then as soon as the nocturnal downslope flow returned, all the smoke went down into, I think it was mainly Chico, and got some complaints from that. So here we had a very complex interaction between stability and winds. And one of the takeaways to really get from this is that, yeah, the forecast is going to be for the valley. And if we're going to be forecasting for a prescribed fire, we have to be very careful about exactly where it is and think about what it's going to do after burn hours as well with that nocturnal drainage flow. So it's just a matter of really focusing in on where that prescribed fire is happening, since the standard forecast won't necessarily capture the conditions of what's happening in that nearby prescribed fire. But of course, the smoke does affect the program, and if it's below that 2,000 feet or daily variable elevation, then that will affect the acreage that the county is allowed to burn as well. So we're going to be careful with our prescribed fires and do our best, but there's at least some solace to take here that if we are going to get complaints, if we are going to make a mistake, it's because of a very complicated meteorological setup. But we can learn from it and do our best to not make this particular mistake again. And that is everything from the case studies. Are there any questions about them or any questions about everything I've talked about so far at all? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move right along to our tour of the dashboard and a review of how to do the acreage file submission. So I'll go ahead and stop the recording here since we have some good videos on how to do both of those things. All right.